Welcome to Fresh Quilting. I'm Catherine of Running Dough Quilts, and I'm here today to show you a fun technique called pieced applique. Pieced applique is a way to get the freedom of applique without any raw edges or hand stitching. So, to start with, you're going to need some fabric to applique, something to make templates out of. I love freezer paper, but you can also get heat-resistant template plastic to cut whatever shape you want out of. Or you can also sometimes find pre-cut shapes like these circles that are nice and precise to work with. For my purposes today, I'm going to need a rotary cutter and a ruler. You're also going to want some scissors, some quilting thread, glue-based of some sort with a fine point tip. So you're going to get all your supplies together, and then you're going to need a foundation to piece onto. So I've got this little mini top. This is a paper pieced airplane, sort of traditionally pieced into a block. And then I'm going to do pieced applique to create the trail that comes off the back of the airplane. So first, to start with, we're going to need our template. And I know that this is going to be about 2 inches wide, so that's what size I'm going to cut my strip. So freezer paper, it's great. The shiny side will stick temporarily to the back of my fabric, so I don't have to worry about it shifting. So I know I need it to be 2 inches. I like it to be just a smidge narrower. Cut it. So just to hold it out of the way. Yes, I'm using a good blade on paper. If you use cut on paper a lot, you might want to get yourself a extra rotary cutter to keep an old blade on so that you can have sort of a designated paper cutter, but every once in a while, it's not a big deal. All right, and you're also going to cut your strips. So we have that, and then we need to cut our strip. Now the strips are going to need to have seam allowance on them. So if this was 2 inches, the strip needs to be at least 2.5. It doesn't have to be perfect, and I actually like to bump it up just a little bit because I like to have a little extra to work with if things get wiggly. So I'm going to cut this about 2 3/4. So cut, cut, cut. There you go. So you've got your template and your fabric, and you're going to head over to the ironing station. So here we go. So shiny side down because that's the side that will stick. Now you can stack these pieces of paper and sort of grow. You can add another piece to the end and it'll work just fine, but I only need this much distance, so I only need one piece. And then I'm just gonna press it down. It really doesn't take much heat. Be careful if you have steam in your iron because it can warp the paper and make it not stick and you'll have to start over. So stuck down, you can see it stays really well. And then we're gonna wrap these seam allowances over and press them in place. Now the sharper you can get this, the easier it's going to be on you in the next step because you're really going to rely on this sharp crease to see where to stitch. You're going to be stitching in the crease. So press down this side, press, press, press. Turn it around. Watch your fingers. This is a really easy technique to burn your fingers on. Don't ask me how I know. Just keep pressing. There we go. All right, and then I'm gonna wanna make sure this is really sharply pieced. I'm not gonna use this top edge up here. I'm gonna make sure this is really sharp. So what I like to do a lot of times is pull the paper out, flip it over, get everything where it needs to go, get all that seam allowance under there, and press it one more time. This is the spot where if I was using steam or starch, I would use that because that would kind of give me a real final press on that to make sure it was good and crisp. So we don't need that in them. All right, and then you're going to get your top that you're going to be piecing this applique onto. I'm going to get it ready to go. So see, I use this end. For this project, since this goes off under here, I actually open up the seam allowance. But if you were to do just a regular rectangle, you could fold these under and do all sorts of stuff to have a final end in there. But for this, because I ended a seam allowance, I'm going to take advantage of that and just sort of open that seam up, tuck it in, line this up on here. Then you're going to get your glue base, whether you use traditional glue base like you would find at a quilt shop or a school glue with a fine tip. Either one works. I prefer for this particular one to put the glue under one side. If I try to flip it over and glue it and then flip it back, I end up making a mess. So I like to glue one side at a time. glue a little bit, press, glue a little bit, press. If you get too much glue, it's not the end of the world. I usually get too much glue. It pops right out, it washes off later. You're not using super glue, so, you know, be careful, but also don't stress. Just keep gluing all the way down. Like I said, if you get a little bit on your top, it's not a big deal. You just don't want to gunk up your iron. So you do that side, and once that side's in place, you come over here. Usually the second side goes a little smoother because you're not trying to keep it in place. The other side's already glued and keeping that in place. Glue all the way down. Press, press, press. So make sure it stays in there. And there we go. So that is basted in place right there. So it's not going to come up. So then, once you have a top that's basted in place, like this one, it's all set and ready to sew, you're going to flip it over, and you're going to take your scissors that I have lost. Take your scissors, and you're going to come in this groove and very, very carefully, just cutting the background fabric and not the piece that you appliqued. You're going to cut all the way down, just like that. Then you're going to open it up. If you got a little bit too much glue, you might have to pop something out. But you can see that nice crease that I made right there. That's going to show me where to stitch on either side of this. Line up your needle with the crease and just start sewing. Carefully. If you're doing strange shapes like circles or curves, you might find that you want to use a zipper foot or something to get into the groove better, but for straight lines, a regular foot works just fine. So stitch, stitch, stitch. When you're doing straight lines like you're doing here, or like you would do if you were using this for slice and insert, you can just go right off the edge. Take it out. Turn it around and go down the other side. Back in that ditch. Pay careful attention that you make sure this is good and open and you're not accidentally stitching any of the applique, because you can see I got a lot of glue on there, so it's kind of sticking to itself, and that happens. And like I said, it'll just wash out and it won't be any big deal at all. So you're going to want a thread that blends really well right here. It just sort of helps. If there's any issues, you won't see it. And there you go. So we've done that. For this particular project, I'm actually going to need a third seam right here. But first, I like to go trim off the excess from the sides right here so that it's not cut up in my seam. So get the scissors. We'll just trim the ends right here so you can see. Normally I would trim all the way down. You can use scissors or a rotary cutter for this, but we're gonna get this funny little angle. My groove is actually on this side for this one. And stitch. Snip. Sometimes I have to come back in here and finish off a little bit. This one still needs the seams trimmed, but you can see, there you have it. So let's get everything, all the seams flipped where they need to go. And that's what you'll have. You can give it another little press and voila, you've got this. You can see where I've done some circles using this template right here, where I've done some curves using things like heat-resistant template plastic. It's really, really great for slice and insert if you want to have a little more control. You can see how I went under, over, and nothing shifted. I don't have to worry about the final block moving. Whatever this background size starts out as is what the finished piece will end up as. And that's really, there's so many possibilities. You can see how I took those paper pleat appliques, pieced into a traditional top, and then I used pieced applique to do the flight trails behind each one, and then I added quilting to add a little more dimension to it. I did some clouds and some fluff on the trails, and really so many amazing things you can do using this technique. So hope you'll give it a try.